So it was about a late 20s, early 30s narrator that lived in his parents' basement and was a naive and self-destructive, kind of fucked up guy who slowly turned into the warm-hearted hero by this act of filial piety with his parents, caring for them as they aged and approached their deaths. So the book set the reader up to feel not much sympathy for the narrator and his sort of ineffectual not contributing much to the world, just living in his parents' basement as a adult fuck up. And then slowly you learn more about his parents and their issues and his relationship with them. And I think it's a place to draw sympathy from. Now, I couldn't have said that or explained the novel in that way as I was composing it or editing it, or at any point over the past 2.5 years, really, until recently. It was called I, which is an insane title, or it's a strange title. The goal of which, I think, when I was writing it, was to kind of suggest this narrator's self-obsession, and then it also had some meaning in the structure of the book that I think kind of starts to point out some of the flaws that it had, the major flaws that sort of undermined the whole book's idea. But I think to talk about that, I have to talk about how I wrote it. So I drafted for about 6 months in a sort of feel around in the dark way. I didn't know what my subject was. I didn't know what the style or the narration or the language would be like. I'd never written a novel. I had started 3 or 4 and gotten a few months down the line and didn't like whatever it was I was doing, and so but this time I was really going to do it, and I had amassed hundreds of pages of notes and attempts at some sort of novel, but for 6 months I really had no idea what I was doing, and then I had a rush of creative insight and mania, and for 2 weeks wrote 12, 14, 16 hours a day, 10,000 words or more a day, taking some of the parts from the 6 months of drafting and some of the story that was just kind of coming to me, and wrote it down in 13 chapters. Each chapter was a day in sort of a semi-plotless but story-filled day-to-day life of what began with almost totally this character, and then was increasingly more about his parents who were, aging and approaching or having to face their own deaths, sickness and old age, and their relationship So the book became increasingly about that, but as I was drafting it in this manic state, I didn't have much awareness of what was going on. I just knew that I was onto something and it felt really good. And so then I edited it. I think I put it in a drawer for a month, and then I came back and edited it one chapter at a time because I had amassed so much material. The only way I knew how to take what was to me just kind of a vague, undefined mass and make it into something was to piecemeal it. And so there were 13 chapters, and I resolved to edit and have a kind of final version of each chapter 1 month at a time. So the first month I worked on it, I worked on chapter 1, and then I put that away, worked on chapter 2 for a month and put that away, chapter 3, put that away, and I wouldn't go back and look either, which is kind of a warning in itself, that things were maybe headed in the wrong direction. But I couldn't look at it because I didn't feel that I could look at it because I thought I'd get overwhelmed by going back and fixing things and changing things, and I thought if I could just do one chapter at a time and make it as good as possible, then forget about it, put it away, then I would be able to get through to the end and have something completed. And it worked. So I worked like that for 13 more months. And at the end of each month, I would send a chapter to, a friend, a writer, a mentor, someone, just so that it would be out in the world, and I could, wipe my hands clean of it. At the end of that 13 months and the 6-7 months of drafting, I put it away again for a few months, and then I went back and read it all as one cohesive work, and was, I found a lot of things that were interesting, and I found a lot of incoherent. I think the main problem with the book was in the way that I created it. It was very piecemeal, and there wasn't any central driving force, And I remembered as I was editing and working over that course of that year, I would be really convinced that what would move the novel along was more of a plot, and would try to kind of add or enhance or focus on the plotted elements in my original draft. And then the next month I would be convinced that no, it was this first person narrator and his sort of speech patterns, and it was going to be a voice driven and kind of unreliable narrator type of experience for the reader. And then the next month it would be all structurally based, formal kind of mathematical kind of concepts on how the structure would work and what it would mean for all the other sections of the book. And so I had at the end a book with all these different engines driving for a moment and then turning off and being replaced by something else. And that was the experience of reading it. And also the most fatal flaw was that the narrator was naive and incapable of reflection or of slowing down events and looking deeply at them by design. I mean, that was who he was as a character. However, because the book wasn't necessarily very plot driven and there wasn't any sort of loud events happening. It was trying to be a quiet, subtle subject as told by a very loud and brash narrator. Therein lies the problem. You know, he was unable to look deeply and slowly and show a little bit more of the heart of the novel's question. And so, you know, in the end, he was brushing over really significant moments, but he didn't have the capacity to do anything but brush over those moments. And so, you know, I guess after trying to resuscitate it a few times, I realized that it was a prototype, and it would be best if I put that novel away and take what I learned from it about what the central questions, what the real investigation of the book was about, which was very clearly defined to me over the course of, you know, the 24 plus months that I had worked on it, and then find a subject that would allow me to carry out that investigation or that question of the book without those inherent flaws. So, you know, where I am now as to where I was when I started drafting the book is totally different. I was in the complete dark as far as what I was actually trying to write about, what the book was concerned with, how the book would work, what were the qualities that I really wanted the book to have. And now I know through experience the answers to those questions, or a way to ask the questions in the most exacting ways. And so I have, you know, a beginning point again, a place where I have a simple subject to go very deeply into, and because I don't know all the answers, I can still be surprised and be carried along in, you know, what happens next. So rewriting a new book with a very different conceit, but that I think is trying to investigate the questions that my failed first novel didn't quite know how to ask. And thanks for listening to all that. I think, you know, it's helpful to share more openly my creativity and the process of writing, and how, you know, for me, being attached to the content of the work I was doing over the past 2.5 years would hinder me in writing the piece that I really is asking to be written. So it's kind of a fantastic opportunity, and I'm grateful for my prototype and all the prototypes before, but it's time to begin anew. And I am going to read an excerpt from it that I think demonstrates the fun and kind of brash parts of the character, but also his limitations, and how you can't really look deep enough to see where the heart of the book is through this character's eyes. First person narrator, and I think this is the very beginning of the third chapter, so in the morning of the third day the book takes place. I pretended to be asleep when Pops opened my bedroom door, and he came back wearing a hoodie and a hat and a coat, yelling, "We've got 10 inches of snow." And I was still half asleep. I said, "Do you want me to snow blow it?" "Well, I want your help," he said. "Okay, I'll snow blow it," I said. "Well, we've got a lot of digging just to get to my car," he said. And then he said I didn't have to rush. No rush. But he was lingering in my doorway. Like, "I'll wait here in your doorway until you're up." But I said, "No, let's do it right now." And so, 29 years old, still getting wakey-wakies from my dad. First, outside, he was trying to show me in what way to start the snowblower, then where I should snowblow first, then where I might aim the chute. But by the end, though, I swear I was snowblower king. I was blowing one track up the driveway, and when I reached the sidewalk, where the street plow had crushed the snow into an icy mess that the snowblower could not fuck with, I was forced to do little layers at a time, and I would reverse and forward and reverse and forward until the snowblower stopped wanting to go into and out of gear. Finally, I made it to the street and turned around to start the second track down the driveway, but the snowblower wouldn't shift out of reverse, and a steel cable had frayed off and was hanging down totally limp. So I reversed down the whole driveway, not blowing any snow, and my dad was looking at me like, "Hey, dummy," and I was yelling at him, "Bad news," but in my mind I was like, "Yeah, I know, dummy. It's broke, dummy." And when he laid down so he could have a look at what was wrong, and I was trying to point it out where the cable was once attached to, and he's not seeing it, and I'm like right here, right fucking here, annoyed, acting dumbly trying to point to the same point, like it's right here. And finally, when we got to the tiny place where it was once attached, and he agrees, "Yeah, we're not gonna fix this right now, yeah." When he lays all the way back, legs fully extended, arms by his side, and closes his eyes, for less than even a tenth of a second, I wondered if he had died.